Welcome to the 2024 series of the Property Report podcast by PropertyGuru. Throughout this series, we will investigate the newest trends in the real estate sector, examining different Asian markets. This time, we are diving into a compelling topic that explores investment opportunities beyond Asia's major metropolises. Investing in Asia's secondary cities. Now, these cities are increasingly becoming hotbeds of growth and development, presenting unique opportunities and consideration for real estate investors. Joining us are our distinguished judges from the PropertyGuru Asia Property Awards Series. We have Ms. Cyndy Tan Jarabata, President, TAJARA Leisure and Hospitality Group, Inc., and Chairperson, Judging Panel, PropertyGuru Philippines Property Awards. We also have with us Eddie Guillemette, CEO, Midori Inoki, and Chairperson, Judging Panel, PropertyGuru Asia Property Awards, Greater Niseko. And Thien Duong, General Director, GroupGSA Vietnam, and Chairperson, Judging Panel, PropertyGuru Vietnam Property Awards. Hello, judges. Great seeing you all.
Great to see you, Tina.
Okay, for our first question, judges, what factors make secondary cities in Asia attractive for real estate investment compared to major metropolitan areas? If we'd like to go ahead first, Ms. Cyndy.
Okay, I think because of opportunities also, expansion of businesses outside of the primary cities, the diversity also of the type of businesses to open. So normally in the city center, you have like the big conglomerates expanding. But if you go to regional sectors in that particular area, you have the locals who are highly entrepreneurial. So you do have that mix of business owners. So you do have a strong competitive advantage, both for the regional developers and the national one. But one thing good is that what we recognize is the flexibility and also creativity of the business owners. So if you and lifestyle, people decide to go outside of the metro to the secondary areas because it's more relaxed, less traffic, I think also less commuting. And you see a lot of the workforce coming from the secondary cities and going into the primary one, especially if it's like a driving distance or you commute. And a big factor also is closer to work. Cleaner air. More space. So there's a lot more attraction now of especially the young generation that they don't have to be in the big city because of the hybrid setup. And some are still okay for remote work. So there's so much of that opportunities as well.
Yeah, I think, like right now I'm in Ho Chi Minh City, Cyndy is in Manila, right? But we've got Eddie who's in the mountains in Niseko. So, secondary, you're talking about a place which Cyndy mentioned about lifestyle, it's always nicer there, with secondary homes. Of course, there's also the issue of affordability, right? Like the big cities are always much more expensive, right? So, there's an opportunity to buy something that is your secondary home. And if you're lucky enough to actually live and work in one of these secondary city like Eddie, he can probably tell you a lot more about that. But, just kind of, being in the mountains and with that nicer, cleaner air. Whereas I'm, in Vietnam, you have secondary cities such as Da Nang and Phu Quoc and Nha Trang, where you've got the beaches.
Yes.
Right. So, it's got all those advantages that, the big cities and the hustle and bustle and the noise. So, yeah, big advantage as secondary cities.
No, I agree with everything that you guys have said. And I think from our perspective, being in Niseko, the way we try and summarize it when we're talking to investors and other developers is Niseko in particular is a place, it's an investment that you can enjoy. Mm-hmm. Unlike perhaps maybe a city investment where if you buy a place or you develop a place, you're going to rent it out. It's going to be rented out year round. In a place like Niseko, you can actually use your property investment for part of the year and you can rent it out for a part of the year. So you get to enjoy the benefits of both, of being able to use it and generating a yield, which is much more difficult in a city, unless you're using Airbnb and other services like that, which increasingly is not really a viable option in many cities, but is a viable option in a place like Niseko, where we do have all these digital nomads, coming up here to work. We also have people, I get asked all the time about, can I retire to a place like Niseko, or can I live there for 3 or 4 months of the year and then travel? And all of that is possible at a lower price than you could possibly afford in a place like Tokyo, for example.
Awesome. And I guess we can all agree that the hybrid setup is one thing great that came out of the pandemic. What are the economic drivers that contribute to the growth of secondary cities in Asia? And how do they influence real estate investment decisions?
I think I can relate with both Thien and Eddie. Land cost. I mean, it's a big driver.
Absolutely.
So if you're looking, let's say, a key area where you can do development, land costs in the secondary cities is still, I wouldn't say low, but inexpensive compared to the primary cities.
Yes.
The thing is, sometimes if you develop in primary cities, your land costs is the same amount as your development cost. So sometimes your owners would say it doesn't kind of make sense unless you really have a very high yielding capital asset. So when we're looking at, let's say, take for instance, Thien mentioned, yes, I'm based in Manila, but I just came back from Cebu. Not only in the Cebu center, but I was in the beach in Mactan. It's getting highly urbanized as well, but the price point for that one would most likely be 1/4 only compared to a key central area in Metro Manila. The average rate, if I may say, in a hotel would be about, and it can actually fetch for a 5-star hotel in that location, can even fetch, say, 50% higher compared to Metro Manila. So given everything is equal in terms of development cost, so if you have a same cost of development, land cost is much lower in this area. However, your revenues could be 50% more, even ×2 how much when you build, let's say, the average room rate in the Philippines. I think as a developer, you'd really think not only, twice. I think, it's something that's immediate for you to invest. Of course, you just have to find the right plan.
Yes. I couldn't agree more. Everything you said, you took the words out of my mouth. It is about land costs. I mean, land costs in a place like Niseko are 1/10 or even less than 1/10 of what it would cost in a place like Tokyo. And that's where you get where you have the economic advantage. Because as you mentioned, development or construction costs are pretty much the same across a country like Japan, but land costs is so much cheaper, and yields, because Niseko is an attractive place with a mountain for skiing, and summertime with cool temperatures, the yields are also quite strong. So I think you nailed that one.
It's interesting. Obviously, after COVID, with the whole tourist boom, which is currently happening, and people are seeking out these secondary cities, right, for tourism. But I think there's another issue. For example, in Vietnam, the whole industrial growth is very important at the moment. And so, like, if you were looking at a place like Minh Duong, which is just outside of Ho Chi Minh City as a satellite town, there's a huge growth. As a matter of fact, this year, I believe there's more growth in a place like that than Ho Chi Minh City, because of all the kind of the boom in warehouses and factories and that sort of thing sort of currently happening in Vietnam. Aside from that, I would say government initiatives. Number of governments, I mean they're trying to encourage, right, the development of these secondary cities. So you've got economic zones, and they're offering tax breaks and attracting new businesses. So this is the kind of thing that's happening, I think, in Asia more so than, say, North America or Europe. Although, with this whole AI thing happening, I think even North America and America is starting to boom in these secondary towns.
But Thien, you're correct there. One of the things we also recognize in the industrial zones, some of the developers are also building some sort of a township inside. So you have a CBD where you have to complete, let's say, also schools, because they do realize the workers And it's not only in terms of work level. The talents, the bosses, the project heads, they need a place to stay. So there was a time where in the commute from the industrial zone to, say, the main area, you still have to tread like an hour. But now or even 2 hours. But now when you build something inside the industrial zone, and we saw that in the awards where the industrial zones also have actually gotten traction from different developers in different countries. But the change I think I've seen in the past few years is they're also creating central business districts. And again, it goes back to, it's like a mini smart city. So that's a good positioning on what they do. Yeah, so we see that because Thien is chair, and he goes through all these awards, and we try to work it out in terms of, no, my industrial city is better than this. So we get into that. Yeah. So he gets into all these because he has to manage everyone. But I think at one point the differentiation of how you position the industrial zones also, but has also gotten traction in the development mindset.
Now, considering the tourism and hospitality sector, how do secondary cities in Asia capitalize on their cultural heritage and natural attractions to attract investors?
Well, I mean, it's interesting because, Niseko is on the map because it is a ski town. It's in Asia. It's a world-class skiing destination. Probably one of the only ones in Asia that is worth, visiting. And we do get visitors from all over the world. And those numbers continue to grow because of the natural beauty of the place. Now, as it becomes more international, we get more and more requests for, we want the Niseko authentic Japanese experience. And so you have these little CBDs where that is not the case, where it's very international and you may not even see many Japanese people. But the real charm and what gets people to come year round are all the local little shops that exist in Japan. And in Niseko in particular, and provide that sort of Japanese hospitality that is, not really catered for in the middle of a ski town, right? Which by definition has to be international. So people come to Niseko for the food, in addition to the amazing skiing. People just want to eat the local food, the local seafood, and they want to interact with Japanese people who are so particular about whatever it is they're doing, whether it's seafood, whether there's a whiskey distillery here, there's local wineries, there's amazing farms and dairy farms all over Hokkaido that you can visit and enjoy local products. So that will always be the draw, I think, for this area, and it's something that Niseko has really leaned into.
I think that's quite interesting. So even, let's say, if Thien and I don't ski, you can come up with an itinerary for us.
If you like to eat and you like to drink and you like onsens, like there's natural hot
drink,
springs.
Eat, what else? Yeah, of course.
Onsen, so hot springs.
Yeah.
Local hot springs all over Niseko. There's probably 50 of them.
Booking a flight now, guys. Booking a flight.
Yeah. But it is all about, at the end of the day, it's all about the food. That's what keeps people coming back and allows us to, work with young people. So we have kids coming to our camps. They enjoy skiing. They get introduced. One of the big parts of our camp is introducing kids to farms and organic farming and just the amazing produce that's here. And then their parents come, they enjoy the eating, and then the grandparents come and they enjoy their food journey throughout Niseko, and local restaurants have really catered to that, and other, like I said, the whiskey distilleries and the wineries that are here now are all leaning into that.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, I think, big cities, what's been happening with, the ease of travel, right? You have cities are becoming more and more alike. You have the same brand, the same hotel chains, you have the same restaurant chains, and so I guess more and more secondary cities have to differentiate themselves. So then you get the more boutique and the more special kind of places to stay and places to eat, like what Eddie's describing, right? So I think they would create environments which are more, I guess, more related to the country that they're in, So I think that's the interesting thing about the secondary cities, because, people will come to, let's say, Ho Chi Minh City, right? But they want to go somewhere else as their holiday, either in the mountains or by the beach, right, for Asia, And so when they go to places like that, there's a little bit more of an authenticity in terms of, let's say, if you want to eat, Japanese food, and then, many, I don't know what it is, right? So a lot of restaurants in cities now, they all try to become fusion, right? They all link and be international, right? But sometimes, seriously, if I go to Japan, I just want to have some Japanese food, like some old-fashioned Japanese food,
Exactly.
So I think that's the interesting part about it.
Yeah. Well, for Philippines, for instance, we're surrounded by coast, and the countryside is also beautiful. So from 30 minutes, if you want to do, let's say, just driving distance from 30 minutes to even 2 hours flight, or even just a drive, there's a lot to do in the countryside. And also, let's say, swimming. We were, I was sharing earlier that, it's like 30 minutes to, and I can actually see the beauty of the ocean already. You drive a little, 2 hours, you can see the sharks. But at the same time, one of, I guess, the uniqueness of Philippines, because we were colonized by the Spanish and that's like 300 years of colonization. And you have a lot of this Spanish influence. So in today's, I had a call this morning with a client wherein they wanted to create a UNESCO site, all throughout the upper sector of the country, which is, again, I wouldn't even consider secondary. I would say even tertiary city. But there is that richness in terms of, they do understand that, there's a strong European market, but it's just that they need accommodation. Yeah. One thing, let's say, going back to, say, you talked about government incentive. Government has also beefed up in terms of access, roads and bridges. It's important that government really fulfills its role also in terms of coming up with ways on how you travel, travel of ease, at the ease of travel. So I think there's a lot of benefits when it comes to developing also in cities outside of the metro.
Now, judges, before I take my siesta, I'd like to give you the last question. How can investors effectively navigate the risks and uncertainties associated with investing in Asia's secondary cities, and what strategies can mitigate those risks?
Let's put on our legal hat, shall we? I don't know, when investors, especially like, for example, Eddie, I guess, coming to Japan, I guess it's very important. You need to understand the legal system, right? So, it's very different from one country to the next, right? The other thing I would say would be you definitely need to have some local expertise, right? So you must team up with somebody, right, or some company, because they will have the cultural kind of sensitivities and understanding that you would not if you're a foreign investor coming to that country. And I guess the other thing would be also, selection, and just the understanding of the planning system that the government have. Have they got? Now I'm putting on my architect's hat, right? What is the 1 to 1,000 planning strategy for the government? In the future, what is their aim? Is there any kind of infrastructure? So you need to think about the overall and the big picture down the line.
Yeah, so totally agree. I think due diligence is kind of summarizes all the different steps that you just mentioned, from the legal aspect, which is obviously the first point. And they're very different. Buying a place in Vietnam is very different to buying a place in Japan. because the legal system is different and different classes of investors depending on, what type of investment you're making. But yeah, doing deep due diligence and working with local trusted partners is probably the best advice that I would give an investor.
Yeah. I would actually agree to the gentleman here. I guess one of a few things I probably would like to share. If you go into secondary destinations or cities, you have to also check your banks, because sometimes the loans are also different. The interest rates are different, especially if you are uncovering an opportunity, yes, but the risk factor is also higher. So the interest rates are maybe different. Selection of designers is also critical, because if you are going through the motions of planning and building, sometimes we would put quite a good budget for good architects, landscape, master planners. It has to be people with experience, and if they have a strong Asia, not necessarily Philippines, because I would always advise our developers that you have to know your terrain very well. So they have to do the due diligence, but working with the right people, consultants, is key. Yeah. In any development, especially in secondary areas where you also want higher yields.
I was a banker for 20 years prior to doing this. The other point to really highlight for investors when you're investing in a secondary market versus a primary or a capital city is you have to factor in illiquidity risk. Now, there's a reason why the land prices are cheaper, right? Yes. The reason the land prices are cheaper is there is a liquidity premium. In other words, it's not as easy to sell when you need to sell in a secondary city. By definition, it's a secondary city. And the reason why it's a secondary city is because there aren't as many buyers or sellers in that matter. And that's why land prices are lower. So understanding that going into a secondary market, you are going to get a discount perhaps, and definitely on land, but there'll be times of illiquidity, which you have to factor into your financing planning.
Yeah, I was just going to touch on a similar thing. It's very important. In many companies, they will come into a country, but they really haven't thought about their exit strategy. So how you can get the money out, right? So it's very important, and it's not always what you think. So you need to do your due diligence. On the place that you go to.
For sure.
Judges, great seeing you once again, and thank you for joining us on this episode of the Property Report podcast, brought to you by PropertyGuru. Now be sure to keep an ear out for our upcoming episodes, where we'll explore even more captivating topics. Now for additional details, please visit asiapropertyawards.com. See you next time.